This is Driving Solutions, exclusively on CBTNews.com.
With the increasing reliance on digital systems for almost everything at the dealership, cybersecurity has now become a top priority, especially in light of the recent cyber attacks. On today's show, we are joined by Brad Holton, who's the founder of Proton I.T, to discuss what they've done since the incident and how dealers can protect their operations moving forward. Thank you so much for joining us on today's show, Brad.
Sure, thanks for having me. Good to be back.
Sure, I bet you're a very busy young man these days in light of everything that's been happening out there in the cyber security world, right?
It's definitely been an interesting quarter. We'll say that, yeah.
Sure. So this past year, we did, see some real threats in the automotive space. What has Proton seen since the recent cyber incident over the summer?
Well, I think we saw a couple things. We saw a huge increase in attacks the automotive space during that time period. I think a lot of the scammers and hackers really realized that the automotive dealership industry, and the really automotive industry in general, has had a ton of wealth, and it's a very ripe sector for attack. So we've seen quite a big increase in the number of attacks that are just being directed at dealers in the last 2 to 3 months. Yeah,
no question. I think it really woke every dealer up and said, "Whoa, wait a minute, we're under the gun, and so are our vendors that we're doing business with," and it's very, very troubling. Has Proton had to do anything differently since that incident to protect its customers?
Well, we've always been aggressive and enforcing the best practices and policies out there, but we've definitely taken fresh looks at different vectors that could affect the industry. So, I don't think anyone really saw an attack like that in their minds that could take out the industry for, weeks. Mm-hmm. And so we really have taken a fresh look at what other vendors have software that runs in our dealerships. How could that affect the dealership? What are ways that you could have lateral movement, not just within the dealership in a ransomware attack, but from outside vendors? And then, if a vendor is attacked, how can we help a dealer overcome and find ways of getting around that particular tool set or that particular methodology they needed to actually get their business done. So we're definitely kind of taking a fresh look at bigger events and how they could affect from the outside in.
Sure. What's the number one attack method dealership employees should be aware of right now?
I think ransomware, which is what we saw in this last major attack, is still, the number one thing. Mm-hmm. And when it gets in, it's so catastrophic. I mean, it brings an entire dealership or an entire, massive industry down to its knees. Yeah. There's nothing you can do. Everything comes to a complete standstill. From a dealership model, you can't service cars, you can't sell cars, you can't do anything.
Right.
So we're still seeing, that is kind of, we'll call it a big secret in the automotive space. Mm-hmm. Something that's talked about at 20 groups and other little private get-togethers. Yeah. But it's not something anyone actually wants to acknowledge happens. So we get brought into a ton of incidents that are not our clients, but we get referred in, when someone's in the middle of an incident. So we see a lot of them. Yeah. We see, how they all unfold. We see all the pain and suffering that goes on. But it's definitely the biggest one out there, I think, right now. And it's still, still huge.
Sure. A number of the dealers that I spoke to during that event, they said, in the first couple of hours, they said, well, the system must just be down and it's going to come back up. It's not going to be a real problem. And of course, later on, they 24 hours later, they're still getting the calls from their GMs going, no, boss, the system's completely down. We are totally, unable to do business right now. Talk to us about ransomware and how it works.
So, the way it works is essentially, typically it comes into an email. It's the most common attack vector. It could come into a download, but somebody clicks on something, gets in. If you've got the right tools and systems in place, you're going to be able to see it right then. You'll stop it right then. Yeah. If you don't, and reality is most people probably don't, it's going to then move laterally. So it starts immediately scanning the network, looking to see where it is, identify what other computers it can attack, moves laterally, takes over the whole system, and then it launches an attack that shuts down everything and anything. At that point, every single computer you've got basically becomes obsolete. You can't function on it. So at that point, you're in a complete standstill, and you kind of have to burn it all down and start over in order to get everything cleaned up. Sure. Some people choose to pay the ransom. Others choose to not go that route. It just depends on kind of how great a defense you had, whether you had good backups, whether you've got a good strategy, whether you've got a good incident response plan. Sometimes you have to pay the ransom just because the alternative, as we saw in this, recent event, if you try to rebuild from scratch, no matter, what you've got planned, it can just be overwhelming. So that's why these guys are successful in what they do and why they make money, because once they get in, they make it so hard to get back to work.
That's right. And now, having seen this, it would seem to me that now the automotive industry, especially on the retail side, is now on their radar to say, oh, this can have a good payout. So we're gonna pursue this even further. So there's obviously been a heavy emphasis about compliance over the last few years. Can you talk a little bit about the differences in cybersecurity protection and compliance?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a big confusion we're seeing in the space is people say, oh, I've got this little portal I signed up for, I'm compliant, I don't need to worry about anything else.
Yeah.
Reality is that building an environment that is safe from these type of things, you have to first start with the network. I kind of think of it as like a pyramid, like a triangle. So you start with the base, which is your network and infrastructure, getting all the right stuff, making sure you have security patches, you have newer PCs, you're not running outdated operating systems.
Sure.
And then from there, you stack cybersecurity, which is endpoint protection, filtering email, security awareness training, having the right tools and the right team in place to monitor everything 24/7. And when you get all that done, compliance is kind of the easy part. It's just documenting everything you've done in a way that complies with both the FTC, your insurance companies. You're able to provide all that documentation that says, hey, I've done everything I was supposed to do. My network's secure, my building's secure, everything is in the right place. We've got the right team monitoring it. Here's the compliance piece. And it really becomes easy at that point to do compliance.
Yeah, for sure. If there is one thing we should all do today to be more vigilant, what would it be?
I would take a fresh look at what you're doing. There's been several incidents that we've been brought into where a dealer thought they were covered. One case they had the right tools, but they didn't have anybody monitoring it and nobody actually taking action when the software alerted them of a problem. Yeah. And they wound up with 20 locations in a ransomware event. We had another situation where a group we were brought into had the wrong tools. The tools they got did nothing whatsoever. So they didn't have a third party. There's a website Gartner, which Gartner goes out and analyzes all security tools and all sorts of things. And you can use that as a resource to say, okay, it's the stuff I'm using actually legit. And the last piece I would say is get an audit, right? Dealers get audits of their financial all the time, but nobody actually takes a look at what their IT, what they're doing from an IT standpoint.
Right.
So bring in a third party, have someone take a fresh look at it. Make sure that what you think you have covered is actually what you've got covered.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I would imagine your phone was ringing off the hook with dealers when all of this took place, right? To say, you got to get in here, you got to help me, because no dealer wants to be faced with this. Whether you have, 1 or 2 stores or you have 200 stores, this is just something that is going to be painful for the owners and and the shareholders in that company.
I had 80-hour weeks for several months there, and 3 months later it's kind of died away. 6 months later it's an afterthought.
That's right.
And then they wind up the next victim because they never took action. So
That's right.
It's got to be something that you really focus on.
Yeah, no question. One dealer said to me, he said, Jim, the thing about this is that we're going to probably have a whole new crew in here, or at least 50% of the crew in the sales department will be turned over. Here in probably the next year. Are they aware of what's going on? Did they get the necessary training? What are we going to do in this situation? It's got to be something that's at the top of our list every day. We can no longer, look at this.
No question. It's an ongoing battle. And the guys that are doing these attacks are only getting smarter, getting faster, and getting better. They're using AI automation tools now so that they can attack millions and millions of targets simultaneously.
That's right.
So it's going to get worse, and if you're not training your people, if you're not constantly enforcing that, then you're going to be a victim at some point.
That's right. And how do you know if some of those people didn't find their way into the employment of some of these companies? You know what I mean? That now you've got an inside person, right?
Yeah, it's actually happened several times where threats have been an inside attack.
Yeah.
Typically on financial fraud, not so much ransomware, things like that, but
sure.
We do see some insider activity occasionally.
Oh, I bet. Brad Holton, founder of Proton I.T, for dealers that are out there listening. If you don't have some protection and you want to learn more about this and you want to understand, how vulnerable your dealership is, give Brad and his team a call. These are the kinds of solutions that we want to be bringing you here at CBT News. So Brad, thank you so much for joining us on the show. This is a very hot topic, and I'm glad that you took some time out of your schedule there to join us. We're very grateful. So thanks so much. Love to do a follow-up with you to see how this issue is moving along.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Driving Solutions, exclusively on cbtnews.com.